Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. Great to have you all with us this afternoon. We're going to be running a webinar today talking about AI and automation. Hopefully everyone is keeping safe in lockdown, and we should have a really entertaining conversation over the course of the next hour or so. I'm delighted to welcome Corinne Cardona-Smith with me today. Hi Corinne, how are you?
Hi Stuart, and hi everybody. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you for inviting me again.
No, it's a pleasure. Really looking forward to hearing your insights and ideas on AI. My name is Stuart Dorman. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Savio. I'm going to be your host for today and sharing you with some of the insights and ideas that we're seeing in the space of AI as well. So it should be a really great, interesting discussion this afternoon. So just to move on to the next slide, just to set the scene really. We have all been witness and involved in understanding incremental innovation over the course of the many years. We're all used to products that gradually improve. You've only got to look at the car that's parked on your driveway, for example. It's safer, it's faster, it's more efficient, it's quieter, it's more comfortable than the versions that came before it. Or think about the iPhone in your pocket. Every year we get these incremental improvements that improve the battery or the screen, or the cameras get better and better, the processors get faster. Every year the products improve and get gradually better, and that change happens even faster in the digital world. But what we're here to talk about today is not incremental innovation, but disruptive innovation. If you just jump to the next slide. So every so often a seismic shift happens that doesn't just nudge things forward, but completely turns the old world on its head. And there are many, if you jump to the next slide, there are many exciting changes that are in the pipeline that are due to have a seismic impact on the way that we go about our daily lives over the course of the next decade. If you look back over the last few hundred years, things like the steam engine, railways, electricity, all of these things, all of these innovations utterly transformed the way that we engage in our daily lives and created huge amounts of economic activity off the back of it. Now, though, we're seeing many waves coming together. Things like, robotics and energy storage is already disrupting the automobile market. Blockchain technology, genetic sequencing, obviously hugely important in the world that we live in today with the pandemic and using bioscience to solve these problems. But what we're here to focus on today is artificial intelligence, this wave of transformation that's about to hit us over the course of the next decade. And we're going to be thinking about how artificial intelligence can be applied specifically to the customer service sector. So we should jump to the next slide quickly. So some of the things that have been really underpinning this change are obviously this explosion in data that we're seeing at the moment. All of us are leaving a trail of data behind us. We're producing vast amounts of information, and there are more and more sensors being deployed in vehicles, in retail applications, in all of the different physical and digital experiences that we go about in our daily lives, and they're also generating huge amounts of data. And it's the accessibility of this data underpinned by this massive expansion in computing power driven by machine learning and the use of the capacity of GPUs and that are really driving the explosion in AI. That's really driving this wave of artificial intelligence that's crashing across the customer experience sector now, and that's going to drive some of the changes that we're going to see over the next few years. So just jumping on to the next slide. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Corinne to give us a bit more insight from Forrester to talk about AI, and then I'll pick up and talk about some of the practical applications that we can see of applying AI in customer service. So Corinne, over to you.
Thank you, Stu. Let me share my screen. Hopefully this is going to work as it should. Indeed, when I look at the applications of AI and automation, customer service probably one of the great domains of application for that technology, and this is where we see definitely three main benefits. The first one is to enable you to provide a service that is available outside of business hours without extra staffing. And a lot of companies and firms are now using virtual assistants or voice bots even to attend calls. If I take an example, the Office of the Revenue Commissioners in Ireland is now handling 60% of taxpayers' calls via a voice bot. And a number of companies, mainly, for instance, grid operators, who were threatened to shut down their service because of lockdown measures, managed to maintain their service opening, taking thousands of calls, putting in place solutions that involved voice bots. So that's one of the great benefits. The second one is more related to taking away the repetitive tasks, the ones that are like low value tasks, taking them away from agents so they can actually focus on where their human touch adds the most value. A lot of examples are out there, but one of the great ones that I came across is from Hyatt, so this very high-end hotel chain, and they're managing to save 30% per call while maintaining a high-touch service, and also increasing job satisfaction using a virtual assistant for just parts of the reservation journey. So for instance, at the beginning, you might interact with the virtual assistant to tell where you want to go, what are your dates, things that are like just gathering information about your trip. And when it comes to the parts of the journey that need a more human touch, where an agent will add value, the assistant hands over the call to the agent that can do part of that reservation. And then finally, the virtual assistant will take over again, and some automation will take over again to send, confirmation emails or post-interaction surveys. The third benefit that I see is more on the agent side, so augmenting agents to help them deliver an even better service. Automation and AI can be used, to just gather customer information, past transactions, think about pulling out recommendations from a knowledge base, or even improving agent soft skills. There are some solutions that can help the interaction and the call in real time while an agent is talking to a customer, help agents like improve their empathy and improve the way they're listening and they're talking during the call to make it an even better experience. A health insurer in USA called Humana is leveraging an AI-based solution to listen to calls, providing real-time cues to agents. Things like you might be talking a little bit too fast, or maybe you can make him pause to let the customer express what he's saying. So those cues are provided in real time for agents, guiding their speaking behavior. And doing so, Humana saw a great increase in NPS, a 40% increase in NPS, and a reduction as well in average handle time because the conversation is more fluid, and some increase in issue resolution. So AI and automation can actually really do wonders at customer service on those three main aspects. When we look at the data that we collect at Forrester, when we ask companies who are looking for or expanding the use of AI and automation, they can recognize that, right? If we look at the top 5 benefits that they do see in artificial intelligence or automation, they really pinpoint that increase in operational efficiency, in improving customer experience or security, and having an impact as well on revenue and costs. Now, the thing is, to get those benefits, you need to be able to take the right approach. And sadly, that's not always a given. There are some challenges that can prevent you from reaching the ROI that you're expecting. And those challenges come mainly from a narrow view on two things, on both your customer service journey, but also on AI and automation capabilities and opportunities. if we take a closer look at, the common pitfalls that we find here, the first one is the lack of what I would call the end-to-end journey overview. When you think about a customer service journey, it's quite complex, right? It's going to involve multiple digital and non-digital channels, because obviously customers try to self-serve when they can before reaching out to someone else for help. So if you're targeting specific moments or specific touch points within that journey without a clear picture of the entire journey, it's going to be like sticking, a plaster on a wooden leg. You might see that your call centers are overwhelmed because customers can't find the information that they're looking for on your website, for instance. This is where, maybe instead of deploying solutions to handle more volume, you should think about fixing your website issue first. So lacking of end-to-end journey understanding as I think the major common pitfall that we can find here. The second one is the misjudging the technology capabilities. And when I interview vendors who are operating in that space in AI and automation solutions, and when I ask them what are their main challenges with their clients, there's one thing that they all agree on is managing expectations about what technology can or cannot do. And if we're looking for what's the best ROI, what's the best application for an automation or AI solution, it would be something like a high volume, simple use cases without too much the need to hand over to a human agent, right? But if you get it wrong and if you deploy technology without thinking about what the technology can or cannot do, you might end up just frustrating customers and delivering experiences that either keep redirecting you into a loop between unhelpful tools and trapping you into something that is not delivering the value that you're intending. The third common pitfall, I'd say, is about the positioning of the technology and trying to use it to replace humans. And there are definitely like industries and activity sectors where we've seen with the pandemic and a real acceleration of machines taking over human jobs. Sometimes for good reasons, because they enable us to have something that don't put us in too close contact with another human, which is currently risky. But the workforce reduction is still a benefit of AI, meaning that we're changing the way we're working with it, and it's definitely transforming customer service. But it cannot replace humans. They're still necessary for the highly emotional or complex cases where customers will seek a human interaction. And we do see, and it's still valid and over in the data that we collect year after year on customer experience, we do see customer service quality as a top driver in customer experience. So that's important to think about technology not as a replacement, but as something that might complement it. So how can you harness the benefits of AI and automation at customer service, drive better experiences while avoiding those common pitfalls? Well, there are a couple of steps that you can take to actually identify AI right place and role in your customer service journey. And I'm going to go into details for each of them. The first one is to map how to get that clear understanding of your journey. So map out what I would call the service blueprint of your customer service. You might be familiar with the term journey mapping and less familiar with what's a service blueprint. You can see the service blueprint as a supercharged journey map. it shows you what you traditionally see on a journey map. It's the customer journey, right? The steps that your customer is taking, trying to perform a goal or trying to accomplish a task. But it's going to interact as well with employees. So mapping out the employee journey during that that same journey is a good idea, so you can see where those two actors are interacting, where some maybe pain points or frictions that can happen at those critical moments. And then you go a step deeper. What are the business processes? What are the data management points that are actually supporting those journeys? And those can be as well things that you're not, that you're not seeing, that are not visible either for the customer or the employee, but will have an impact on specific steps and how those steps move forward. And so doing that, starting with your customer journey, aligning with the employee journey, and all the business processes that are supporting that will give you the good overview of the customer service that you need to be able to identify where AI and automation are opportunities. And when I say end-to-end, looking at things end-to-end, I mean thinking about really where that starts and where it ends, having in mind the customer experience. It can be a very long journey. It can be very complex, involving multiple touch points and multiple stakeholders, but try to look at things from the very start, so when your customer is encountering an issue, and the very end, which is not just when his problem is solved, but when the customer actually knows about it. And look at all the actions and things that are happening before the contact with your agent and after. What's happening before your customer reaches out for an agent? What did he try? Did he try to self-serve? How did that experience went? How is the experience of trying to get in touch with someone go? Are there pain points where you can do something about for AI or automation? And what about after, building that detailed service blueprint, you might be able to understand some pain points that are also related to your agents or partners that can be taking part of that journey a step further. What you can do next is get a good understanding of the situation that you currently observe. And I'm using a very simple example. Suppose you do have a customer service scores that are going down. Why are they, right? You need to understand what is happening there. And there might be cases where AI and automations are a good solution to what you're observing, and situations where there actually are not. And using that technique that has been, I think, started at Toyota factories, of those 5 why, that 5 why technique is trying to really get a good understanding of the root cause analysis, why you're there, what's you're observing, what's the reason for that, why are you observing your scores going down? Well, maybe that's because there are too long waiting times. Why is that? Maybe there are too many calls. And why is that? Because your customers are calling several times. So why is that? Because they don't get the answer they need at the first call. Why is that? Well, maybe because we are routing to the first available agent instead of the one that can actually answer. So to the question, should you use AI, or is there an opportunity to use AI here? Probably yes, you can probably use AI to try to improve your routing system and route the calls to the right agent instead of the first available. You can be in a totally different scenario. Maybe you have the same situation because, customers need to call multiple times about a specific product replacement and to get mainly updates about the delivery. And you can realize that they do so because when you tell them about the time of the delivery of that replacement, you you don't stick to the time frame that you announced. And that might be because you're missing information about the stock of that product. And if you do not have the information about the stock of that product, then your building expectations are never met. So, but here it's something different, right? That root cause analysis enables you to realize that you have a problem that you need to fix, and it's more about your stock information, and there's nothing related to AI and automation here. That doesn't mean that you cannot deliver a good experience and take benefits out of that exercise. And actually, the UK police force, one of the UK police force, did exactly that with a service design approach. They identified that a large number of calls to 999 were related to requests that were impacting the capacity of their call handlers to help actual citizens who are in need of emergency calls. But the issue was about not so much handling the volume that they were getting, but trying to find a solution for the volume that they were getting that was about just information. Build a solution was about giving access to information. The third step you can take to try to blend human and AI customer service successfully is to prioritize the opportunities that are actually going to benefit both sides. And I think there was a big rush on customer-facing tools and customer-facing solutions with trying to deliver something that's going to benefit customer experience and not so much the employee, but those two are linked. And if you do that activity of building your service blueprint, you will discover a lot of opportunities, a lot of things. Group them, and while you do so, try to identify which ones are going to benefit both employee and customer, and prioritize those. That's what British Telecom did for its field engineers. So those field engineers are picking jobs on the field to build your network or fix cables. And the way those engineers were assigned jobs, so each engineer was attached to a region. You see those different colors? Each engineer was attached to a specific region. And when an incident would happen, well, the engineers that were called were the ones that were in that region. But there were a lot of times where there was another engineer closer, but just in a different region, and they could not handle those jobs. So British Telecom used what's called fuzzic logic to enable their management system to cross those borders and actually be able to assign jobs to an engineer that was closer. Doing that, they decreased, travel and costs. They could handle way more jobs per year, but they also saw an improvement in employee well-being, because that just makes sense. That's just the right thing to do. The fourth step is to really identify and understand what technology can do for you. And when we talk about artificial intelligence or AI, there's a broad range of capabilities that can be combined in the single journey. But there's really a lot of things that the technology can do, and understanding what it can will help you to find the right combination. KPN, a telco in the Netherlands, used a combination of speech recognition, AI, and automation to improve its customer service journey, while also reducing calls and costs. They used it for instance, replacing the identifying first the caller because they were using their phone, but then they replaced the IVR with a speech recognition, so making it faster for a customer to just say in his own words the reason of his call. And then a little bit further, they identified that a lot of the calls were related to invoices, questions on their invoices, and sometimes things as simple as, I don't know how to access my latest invoice. So the team introduced, while the customer was routed to the right agent and some systems were pulling is information for the agent to be able to start attending his call. They also send an SMS with a link to the latest invoice to the customer. And sometimes that was just enough, and the customer would not have to talk to the agent. Doing so, they really had a tremendous impact on reducing the duration of the calls, because both customers and agents were looking at the right invoice, for instance, when they had questions related to that, but also improved self-service rates and the experience overall. The fifth important step is to try to really make emotional connection beyond empathy a requirement of any solution you want to deploy. And positive experiences, you know, are the ones that are both effective, so they provide value to your customers. They're easy. It's not complicated to get value from you, but they're emotionally positive. And we see that emotional factor is often forgotten by companies. Well, it's actually one of the most powerful drivers for a good experience. And last year, I conducted a research around what I call the wow factors of an amazing customer service. There were mainly three main factors: culture and mindsets, the problem-solving aspect, so understanding what you're doing to try to solve the customer issue. But 60% of what would make customer experience good are related to the human touch of the agent. And if you do focus on on those emotional drivers, you can actually see results and provide great experiences, like what the team who built Capital Eno at Capital One, their AI assistant, starting in 2017, I think. The team really focused on that aspect, so trying to build that assistant with emotional abilities and developing that emotional intelligence. And right at the beginning, within just the first 10,000 conversation, the top 3 phrases, the most texted phrases that Eno would receive were thank yous. People would thank the assistant as they would thank a human being for helping them. That's when the team thought they were doing that thing right. Finally, the sixth element important here is to align your success metrics as well at the end-to-end journey level. And I mentioned it, the customer service journey is extremely complex. It will involve multiple touch points, multiple stakeholders. That means as well multiple KPIs and metrics, and a lot of teams might be looking at things differently, right? So there's a lot of things you can measure along a journey. It can be quite difficult to know which ones to focus on, but you need to take an approach that considers that end-to-end journey and how it relates to business metrics overall, not just an isolated metric when you're trying to deploy a solution. One telco wrongly focused too much on one metric that was trying to reduce call time, and actually that led to generating more costs. They tried to reduce the call time for customers onboarding on their new fiber network. But later on, partnering with McKinsey & Company to analyze their journey data, the company found that doing so, reducing call times, caused actually more follow-up technician visits, costing them 10 to 20 times more than it had saved shortening up the calls. So aligning your metrics at a journey level and how it relates to business is something that you really have to do. So to recap, I mentioned those 3 benefits of AI and automation for customer service, and the importance of taking the right approach to harness them. I give you like those 6 steps that you can follow to successfully blend AI and human customer service. They're not linear, right? They can sometimes move forward on parallel streams. if you have to if you look at them and you have to take away two main things, I think it's that we can group them in two major principles that you can keep in mind. The first one is to take that journey approach for your analysis, for your prioritization, for your success metrics. Really have in mind that journey approach. And the second one is to drive emotional connection. Use technology to support that emotional connection, not to replace human, but trying to augment them and benefit them. And that was it for me. I thank you for your attention, and I'm handing over back to Stu.
Thank you very much, Corinne. That was fascinating. Really great to hear your insights. And for those of you online, please do feel free to post questions in the chat window, either to myself or to Corinne, and we'll pick those up in 10 or 15 minutes or so when I've just finished talking through my piece. So please feel free to fire some questions away. So just to pick up from where Corinne left off, I was planning on talking about some of the insights that we're seeing at Sabio and think about taking some examples of how you can practically implement AI within your organization, starting small and then building to actually access some of the benefits that Corinne just mentioned. And from our perspective, there are 4 key areas that we see AI being applied at an increasingly industrial scale across the customer journey today. So first of all, we look at using AI and machine learning to track a customer's behavior through a website to understand and make predictions about what that customer is looking to do, whether it be they're on a sales journey, whether they're on a service journey, or whether maybe they're just browsing and not really looking to contact you. And driving a personalized experience to nudge the customers to the right channel or maybe to no channel at all, depending on what they're looking to do. So that's the first area. The second area is to use conversational AI, chatbots and voice bots, to act as a really smart concierge to understand why the customer's contacting, to ask them a few questions, and then maybe automate or maybe enhance that experience by bringing the right person into the conversation to allow that customer to get their problem solved quickly. So just building on blending of AI and humans, as Corinne talked about in her session. The third piece is using AI to drive better routing decisions to match an agent with a customer to make sure that the conversation resolves as quickly as possible from a customer perspective. And then the fourth, as Corinne talked about, is using AI to augment the agent experience, to listen into the conversation and to make suggestions to help the agent deliver a better experience for the customer. Now, given the time, I'm just going to focus on the first 2 today. So if we can move on to the next slide, I'm going to focus first of all on conversational AI and really some practical examples of how to get started with this. So conversational AI is fast democratizing as a technology. It's becoming available through the likes of Google and Amazon and the like to allow customers to access this technology at a much cheaper cost than was previously possible. And really, as far as we're concerned, this is really key to unlocking digital transformation within the contact center. If you don't understand who the customer is and why they're calling, it's really hard to start driving a better digital experience. And conversational AI is really key to that. So jumping to the next slide, this illustrates the enhancements and developments underpinned by AI machine learning that we've seen through speech recognition over the course of the last few years, and particularly over the course of the last couple of years, where more and more people have been using Alexa and Siri in these devices at home. That's driven the amount of data, which in turn has improved the algorithms and the accuracy of this, which we're now able to take and apply to our contact centers. So a huge improvement in speech recognition has been underpinning this drive towards natural language. What's also happening in the background, if we move to the next slide, is again a really advanced development in speech synthesis. So we've all heard clunky robotic text-to-speech examples, Stephen Hawking being a great example of a very robotic voice. And this is really, traditionally, has been people's perception of synthetic speech or text-to-speech. But again, driven by machine learning, driven by AI, what we've seen is a huge advance in the quality of speech synthesis over the last 12 to 18 months, to the point where now we're approaching it being almost indistinguishable from a human voice. And that really unlocks a huge amount of potential to create dynamic applications, to have conversations with customer without having to preempt and pre-record every single response that we need to play back. And what we're also seeing now is the ability for celebrities or maybe voice talent within your organization to have their voice sampled and to create a custom speech recognition voice. You can see Samuel L. Jackson here recording a custom voice for Alexa, and yes, you can have the swearing switched on and off. But it allows you to create customized voices that can be completely dynamic and respond to customers and really drive that conversation experience. So moving on to the next slide, we've talked about speech synthesis, we've talked about speech recognition and the enhancements that we've had there. But underpinning that, we've also seen some really great developments in the tool sets that allow the artists, the designers to create these fantastic applications. So firstly, understanding actually what you mean when you speak to the system, natural language understanding. Secondly, drawing out the intent from that. What is it you're actually calling about? What's your reason for contact? And making sure that we can match that to the appropriate outcome. The third piece is the who. The ability to extract information from the conversation to allow you to be able to resolve the customer's problem as quickly as possible, and doing that in a very natural conversational way. And then finally, the tooling, the dialogue management tools, the creation environment to allow the artists, the designers, to be able to create these really engaging, fantastic conversational experiences that drive the engagement with the customer, help them get their problem solved or get them through to the right person. And if you just jump onto the next slide, I kind of break this down into two different areas. So we've got huge amounts of development in the science side of things, driven by AI, driven by machine learning. You know, the advances have been huge over the last few years, but you mustn't forget the art side of it. You mustn't forget the ability to take the abilities of these new platforms and create experiences that are engaging for customers. And it comes back to Karina's design piece earlier on. That's such an important part of bringing this to life and making it work. So just jumping to the next slide, just to give you a few examples of here in terms of how the machine learning elements of this work, what we can do is we can start to understand the customer's intent, but we can just give a few examples to the machine learning platform as to how a customer might express, in this example, the ability to file a claim or make a claim in a call center. You know, the platform, there could be many thousands of different ways that I as a customer could express I want to make a claim, I want to file a claim. We just need to give the system a few examples and it can work out for itself, and it's really fast at learning, you know, how customers respond. If we jump to the next slide, equally what we can do is extract complex bits of data from an interaction. In this case here, a really simple example. I want the weather forecast in San Francisco tomorrow, but there are two really key pieces of information that we need to extract from that utterance from the customer to help understand and give them back a response. So it's the weather for tomorrow, and it's the date and the place that the weather relates to. So we've got the intent, which is the weather forecast, the place and the time, and we can capture all that information from a single utterance and then play the correct response back to the customer. So if we jump onto the next slide as well, what we can also do here is start to apply logic and data to help improve the performance of speech recognition. Now, those of you that have had a telephone conversation with anybody and they try to say a postcode or maybe a vehicle registration number, quite often, because of the quality of the line, it's often easy to get confused between B's and P's and D's and S's and F's and things like that. And artificial intelligence is the same. But what we can do here is to create a hypothesis of maybe a few different options of what we think the customer said. So we could have, in this example here, there are 3 or 4 different possibilities ranked by probability in terms of what we think the customer said as a vehicle registration number. But what we can then do is ask the customer a secondary or a tertiary question that says, okay, can you just tell me the make of car that you've got there? And in this case, it's a black BMW. So what that allows us to do is to look at the hypothesis that came back the first time round for the vehicle registration number, match it against the vehicle, and we've got a much more accurate answer. And this allows us to get really high levels of accuracy, up into the 90s for some of these complex bits of information that we need to collect from customers to allow them to identify themselves and go on and complete their interactions. So this is where the art and the science really start to come together to really make this technology fly and work really well for customers. So the next stage in the process, and if we jump onto the next slide, is the ability to apply this to the context of a contact center and really understand why people are calling. So, you know, in a typical contact center today, you might have a, you know, press 1 for sales or press 2 for service. At best, we can only get, you know, a very small number of reasons for calling, of intents from that customer using that traditional way of doing things. But by asking them a very open question, hey, how can I help you? Why are you calling today? We can get, you know, tens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of different reasons for that customer calling. And that allows us to make a much, much smarter decision about what to do with a call next, whether it be to drive it towards an automated process, whether it be to make a better routing decision, identify it as bad demands, or maybe expedite it to the right person in the call center that can help solve that problem really quickly. So applying natural language, applying this as a really smart concierge to sit at the start of your customer journey, we believe is really key to unlocking digital transformation. So how do you get started? If you jump onto the next slide, then we have a really well tried and tested methodology that allows you to go from 0 to starting to unlock some of the benefits of automation within an 8-week period. So we can switch this platform on, it's all from the cloud, we can switch this technology on within a matter of hours, we can filter a few calls off that come into your call center today, we can start with essentially a blank sheet of paper and ask the customer why they're calling, and keep on capturing that data from the customer, categorizing it and allowing the platform to learn. And over a very short period of time, we start to get a really, really strong understanding about why customers are calling, what the opportunities are for better routing, what the opportunities are for automation. And within an 8-week period, we've got a very robust model. It's trained, it's ready to go, it's ready to give you information on where the ROI and the business case sits, and to accelerate that transition towards automation. And really, this is designed to solve one of the key problems that many organizations face, which is, I know that there's benefits in AI, but I don't really know where to start. Well, the answer is to start with data from customers, and let the data do the talking in terms of driving the process forward. So just moving on then to talk about the second area, which is using AI or machine learning specifically to understand the customer journey through the website, understand why customers are transitioning from web into contact center. And when we use that and capture that information, we can use the data to start nudging customers in the right direction. So if we move on to the next slide, what we typically find, you know, when you boil it down, there are 2 routes to customers solving their problems. They either go down a digital channel or they pick up the phone. They might find your phone number somewhere. Now, for customers to pick up the phone, clearly they hit the call center, and what we just talked about with AI helps us to understand why they're calling and hopefully guide them to the right place as quickly as we can. But for those customers that go online, quite often we get some great data to understand their journey through the website. But as soon as they drop off the website into the contact center, all of the information we have on that customer disappears. There's no way of linking those 2 journeys together unless we use dynamic telephone numbers or a callback mechanism to link the web journey with the contact center journey. And if we do that, that allows us to really understand and drill into why customers are leaking from the website, which pages they're visiting, which content are they engaging in, why isn't it working? You know, are there ways in which we can trial different content out or trial different journeys out and ultimately nudge them, hopefully to solve their problem or potentially expedite them through to the right person in the call center. But the first step to unlocking that is to link that web journey with the contact center to understand where things are failing. So if we jump to the next slide, here's a quick example of an organization, you know, within the insurance sector that we did this for fairly recently. Now, for this particular client, we could see that 90% of the callers that hit their website simply went straight to the contact us page. They found the phone number, they picked up the phone, they didn't engage in any content, they literally just went straight to the phone number and essentially used a highly expensive website as a phone directory. Now, clearly that wasn't what that organization wanted them to do. They wanted the customer to try and at least solve their problem first online before picking up the phone. Now, we can see that 10% of the callers did, and for those that did, we could see which content they were engaging in, we could see which content was retaining customers and solving their problems, and which content was causing customers to leak into the contact center. We could also see that for those customers that did engage in the online content, it reduced their handling time by something in the region of about 2 minutes per call. So we knew that it worked if customers would engage with it. The question was how to get customers to engage with it. And this is where, you know, we could then build machine learning algorithms to try and nudge the customer towards a different outcome. And simply, you know, by putting 1 or 2 clicks in front of the phone number, often can have an impact in deflecting 20–30% of customers away from the phone and solving their problems with the existing online content. So just jumping to the next slide, this gives us a slightly more detailed map of the journeys that customers take. And quite often what we can see is the initial call to action which drives the customer to engage in the first place. So we can see, for example, what was it they searched for on Google and how many of those interactions were driven to the website from Google. We can see which pages the customer went to on the website and the path that they took to try and solve their problem. And then we can see off the back of that the next step that the customer took. So did they then go to the web chat channel? Did they pick up the telephone? Did they use Facebook Messenger or some other channel to engage with humans to actually solve their problem? And it's, to Corinne's point earlier on, having this end-to-end view of the customers, joining those dots and having that holistic view of what customers are looking to do, really is the only way that we can see that really unlocks the potential for nudging customers, for using AI across the entire customer journey. So what that then allows us to do, if we jump to the next slide, is to create unique or personalized journeys based on the predictions that the machine learning algorithms are making about what their customer is looking to do. So if I'm on a sales journey, for example, I might make the phone number quite prominent on that customer journey because I might want to speak to that customer if they need any help. If I'm on a service journey, it might be that we try and nudge that customer towards a web chat. So we might make the phone number a bit less obvious and the web chat window a bit more obvious, and try and drive them down that route because we know it's more efficient and we know we get better CSAT for customers that are on a service journey if they engage in web chat. Equally, if I'm a customer that's just on my lunch break, I might just be browsing, I might not be looking to, you know, to buy anything at all. Why would you pop the phone numbers or the web chat options up for that customer there? Why not hold back on that a little bit? Let them try and find the information that they need, possibly offer them a chatbot, but don't offer them the phone number if they're just looking to browse. So it's a much smarter way of using your web assets to nudge customers towards the right channel that's appropriate for them, and hopefully get the customer problem solved and leverage the team in the call center to do their job more effectively. And of course, the beauty of this as well is that we can actually start to present the agents in the call center with the information that customers shared with us as part of their online journey. We can see what their intent was. We can see which pages they went to. We can understand where they fell out of the website, so the agent's prepared to deal with that inquiry and solve the problem much quicker. And again, as we talked about with the previous example, we have a really simple 8-week program that allows us to start, track data, capture information about where customers are leaking from the website, and then use that ultimately to drive a smart machine learning driven personalization strategy that allows us to nudge customers in the right direction. So at that point, I think we're going to move on to some questions and answers. I haven't seen any questions come through the chat window yet. I'm just double checking the chat window here. So we've got a couple of pre-canned questions here that Corinne and I can discuss. So the first question, Corinne, I'll put this one to you. Obviously, it's been an interesting couple of months, 12 months or so, with the pandemic and people working at home and a big shift to home working. How's that impacted the adoption of AI in your experience over the last 12 months? Have you seen an increase or a decrease?
Well, we've definitely seen an increase in digital channels use. You know, so the shift towards digital was like you could not miss it. Yeah. And depending on some industries, like you know, financial services, for instance, with lockdowns measures and branches having to close, led some customers to move away from the way they were used to traditionally bank at their branch to digital channels for a lot of them for the first time. So there's definitely an acceleration of digital channels. I would say that's what we're seeing in the space of AI and automation. Feels to me like it's more on the where those the technology, where's the technology, who is it facing? I think there was a big shift. We've seen a lot of push for customer-facing tools up to now, more like think about chatbots and things that are really on the customer side. And I think that brands are and firms are now exploring more in-depth solutions that are going to augment the agent, so help them do a better job, and pulling data and information from different systems, so doing the background jobs to help agents do their job in a better way. So that's changing a little bit the way agents are working, but I think it's for the best, and it's good to see that the technology is now used to as well help those who are in the background, not just customer facing, but also agents.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's probably more important than ever when you've got more and more people working at home, perhaps with smaller screens on laptops. Back in the days when we were actually in the contact centres, you'd often walk around a call centre and you'd have agents with multiple screens available, and that would really help them to navigate all of these different complex systems that they have access to. Clearly, from a smaller screen, it's much harder to do. So we've definitely seen an increase this year in the interest in providing better tools for agents to help them have information at their fingertips, and think about the design of the agent experience, as you say, as much as the customer experience. And I think the role that AI can play there is presenting information to agents so that they can focus on the customer and not have to worry too much about navigating all of these complex systems, and make sure they've got the information at their fingertips, as you say, to be able to just focus on the customer and respond, with the right context. Thank you. Thanks. We've got a question come through here as well. So, just from Caroline, do you find a lot of companies would love to introduce AI, however, are restrained by the ball and chain legacy systems?
Say it again. I'm not sure I understood the question.
Yeah, from Caroline is saying that, do you find customers would like to introduce AI but are being constrained by legacy systems?
Oh, well, I'm not covering so much the technology piece of the customer service, but and you might be better for answer that question. But I do feel that at least in some industries and some verticals, potentially in the financial services that I'm more often interacting with, I'm getting the feeling that that time has passed. That it's not so much of a blocker, just because the move for open data, open banking, companies had to open their data, and so they had to open their systems, so they might be ready for that. It might not be the case for other industries that are that were not nudged with that, and then that can be an issue. But from what I heard from customers who might have engaged in initiatives, they seem to find a way to start small, right? To be able to start with a small project, something that is not going to be too challenged by the existing systems, but can already demonstrate value. And I think it's probably the right way to start with a tangible opportunity where you can demonstrate the value, because you will need to have a good business case if you want to move forward with more, bigger intents and projects.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think perhaps that's been the mistake. And earlier on in your presentation, you talked about inflated expectations on actually what technology was capable of versus the reality of the situation. And I think the AI vendors probably played a big part in hyping the capabilities of AI, but and that led to people thinking it could solve all the problems and replace the call center, and people trying to boil the ocean with these huge ambitious AI projects. Whereas I think, to your point, the reality is we can start small now. We can be very iterative in terms of layering AI and building it day by day, week by week, in terms of its capabilities. And ultimately letting the data drive the decisions about which direction you go in and where to apply AI and where not to. And I think, to Caroline's point here, now that we're able to deploy this technology from the cloud, we're able to access more loosely coupled systems, so we can start to apply AI in the voice channel from the cloud. We can switch it on quickly. It shouldn't be held back by legacy systems anymore. I think that the time, to your point, Karine, has gone of that being a constraint now. So yeah, hopefully people can think about leveraging the cloud to reduce any constraints from legacy platforms. There was one of the questions, well, how much of the monitoring data is impacted from customers changing preferences on cookies? I think that probably referred to tracking customers online. Now, that shouldn't really be a constraint, because we're able to apply that to each specific journey. And the whole point is matching the customer journey online to the offline journey. So we can do that through numbers. There's another question here. How do we ensure that contact center agents see AI and automation as an opportunity rather than the threat? That's a great question.
Yes, and I think yes, and I think that's where when you start on that small project and you do have agents training your virtual assistant, for instance, at the beginning, try to see if the potential answers are the right ones, and you use agents to train the bot. That's definitely, it could definitely feel like, so I am training the machine who's going to take over my job. Yeah. So you should be mindful about how you're going to deploy solutions and present them to your teams, because I don't think they're meant to replace agents. They're definitely changing the way the future of work and the way agents are working, but it can be for their own benefit as well. But it's definitely important to make that clear. And the same way I've seen a couple of teams starting with piloting with just a small team, right, of volunteers to try something out and get their feedback. And when it's well done, other teams hear about that and realize that, oh, there's this team who is benefiting from an automated solution and some AI. We also want that, because they're saying great things about it. But definitely including the how you frame it is an important aspect of the successful journey that you're starting with.
I agree. Thank you very much, Karine. Really insightful as always. Great to see you again, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending the webinar today. Hopefully you've taken some really interesting insights away from this. Thank you for taking the time out to join us. Stay safe, and I look forward to catching up in the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.